You've been a guy, Raybon, who's been outspoken about Justin Fields, his fit in Chicago. Now he's in Pittsburgh. What's your reaction?
Brandon, to me, the interesting thing about this trade was that they immediately came out and said Justin Fields is going to be the backup to Russell Wilson. Now, if you would have said that maybe 2, 3 years ago, it wouldn't have sounded so crazy. But I just think that right now, Justin Fields has more upside than Wilson. Their numbers were both a little below average as passers last year. Wilson maybe a tiny bit better. But I think at this stage in his career, Wilson is only going to decline more, where at least Fields, in a new environment, you do have some upside, much better culture, I think, around here than he's had in Chicago, although it is improving. So, for me, I love the fact that Pittsburgh, kind of taking a flyer on two very affordable quarterbacks. They're not really paying any of Russell Wilson's bloated salary from his Denver days, and Fields is going to be cheap this year as well. So I like the move. I don't think it necessarily moves the needle in terms of getting Pittsburgh out of that mediocre purgatory, but it gives them. I think both of these guys are better than Kenny Pickett, so it definitely gives them a chance to continue that streak with Mike Tomlin. Continue not to have losing seasons. But I would just give Fields more of a chance. I just think with his ability to create, most of his issues, I think, are mental, and maybe in a new environment, he could speed up some of his processing. So it's intriguing, but I don't know that it moves the needle past, another one of these like 9-8 type seasons.
Your feelings on the whoever the starter is, your feelings aside, how does Arthur Smith fit with Wilson/Fields, just that quarterback room?
I think Fields will probably give him I think so. Wilson, my worry with Wilson is that Arthur Smith is really creative and he does some things that the fans don't like, and when you combine that with Wilson, a guy who's just really kind of a villain these days, in terms of the media and a lot of fan bases, I just worry that if things go off the rail, it could get really ugly. Whereas if it's Fields, it's just like, all right, whatever, a young quarterback will just figure it out next year. So I like the fit better with Fields. I also think just his running ability at this stage gives Arthur Smith more options. Remember, he had running quarterbacks. Ryan Tannehill had his best rushing seasons under Arthur Smith. Mariota then came and, he's a running quarterback. That offense wasn't half bad. And then last year, Ritter could move around a little bit too. So I think Fields is a better fit because Wilson's not running as much at this stage.
It all sort of fits, right? Because it seems Atlanta, based on some of the reporting that's come out recently, the Falcons were kicking the tires on maybe moving up in the draft. Didn't go so well because it seems Bears, Commanders, Patriots are going to stay put. So instead of Arthur Smith staying in Atlanta and maybe bringing in Justin Fields, they're going to Kirk Cousins with Raheem Morris. And we're talking impactful offseason moves here with Chris Raybon. Kirk Cousins to Atlanta. The Falcons, are they the worthy favorite in the NFC South?
I think what this move does is it raises their ceiling, but in terms of kind of looking at it down the line, it could also lower their floor. So I like the move. I like them taking a shot, but he is coming off a serious injury. He is 35 years old. So should they be the prohibitive favorite? Probably not. I mean, Tampa Bay has kind of shown they're steady. They re-up with Mayfield and Evans and whatnot. So, but I do think, with a guy who's thrown for 400 or more yards in 7 of the last 9 years, and a decent nucleus of talent, you got Bijan, London, Pitts, good O-line. You added Mooney, Moore, Grady Jarrett, Terrell, Bates on defense. Like, if this move does work out, it can be very impactful, but if not, I mean, you guaranteed $100 million to this guy. So it could also go really bad. So I think this was just a really impactful move because it could move the needle in either direction by a lot, because I think the Falcons have kind of been on the cusp. They've been building up the roster, and now they're in a spot with the right quarterback, in the NFC. I mean, you're talking Purdy, Jalen Hurts, and Dak Prescott are kind of the top options in that NFC. So, it's kind of wide open in some senses. So I think this move is going to be impactful one way or the other for the Falcons.
It slightly reminds me of Derek Carr left the other conference, left the AFC West. Perfect. No Mahomes, no Herbert. Don't have to deal with Peyton. And maybe if it worked with Russell Wilson, which it didn't at the time, though, when he signed, and for Kirk Cousins' sake, Jordan Love, Matthew Stafford, Ben Johnson stays. And then you've got the Bears and Caleb Williams, who appears is going to have a new target at receiver. And Darnell Mooney is out, but you've got DJ Moore now paired up with Keenan Allen. What do you make of the fit of Allen fitting in with Chicago and how those all fall?
Yeah, I know this kind of came about a little bit later in free agency. And, the Chargers trying to get under the cap. They end up moving Allen to Chicago. And, a lot of people might, okay, Allen's on the older side. Chicago doesn't have a quarterback right now because they trade Fields. But I think this is this could be a pretty impactful move because Keenan Allen, remember, he's coming off arguably his best season in 2023. Part of the reason he didn't want to take a pay cut. Now, Chicago has that number 1 pick. And I don't pretend to be an expert quarterback evaluator of coming out of the draft. I think these things could go either way. But, we have seen a guy like a CJ Stroud have a great rookie year. We have seen, a guy like Patrick Mahomes, in his second year, really take off. So if Williams is good and, he kind of lives up to expectations, assuming they take him, this roster is pretty stacked, especially when you add Allen to Moore, as you mentioned, you added Swift to the backfield. You still got Herbert, you Kmet and Everett at tight end. Defense has that number 1 graded cornerback. Jalen Johnson, you added Sweat last year. You still got guys at the TJ Edwards on the second level, Brisker and Bayard on the back end. So this is a pretty good roster. And I think Chicago, if Williams is, CJ Stroud, I think is special. We'll talk about him in a second. But if Williams is kind of more toward that, direction rather than toward like the Bryce Young direction, the Chicago team could quickly ascend again in this NFC where you're seeing, you don't have to necessarily have even an elite quarterback. You just have to have a pretty solid overall roster. I think that's what you've seen from, San Francisco, Philly, Dallas, the real contenders over the last couple of years. They have solid rosters all the way around with, above average quarterbacks, and Chicago could get there too. So I think this Allen signing, pairing it with DJ Moore, that is going to be lethal if you have a good quarterback behind center.
Yeah, and for Allen's sake, Mike Williams, explosive player, but you play with a guy like DJ Moore who does not miss games and is out there every week, all 17 weeks. More of an underrated move because the quarterback position with the shuffling of the deck at that position, the running backs, some got their money. I'm glad you're staying away from that and you're going to the defensive end. More an underrated move, I think. Danielle Hunter going to Houston.
Yeah. So when I look at most impactful moves, a lot of people might just look at, the biggest money or, the best player. And I think Hunter is one of the best players to sign with a new team in free agency. But I think what really is impactful for me is when a team like Houston already has a quarterback in place, a quarterback that, averaged over 8 yards an attempt as a rookie, 23 touchdowns, 5 picks, and has a playoff win under his belt before the age of 23. Because now you're talking about a team that's not far off from being a Super Bowl contender and throwing their hat in the ring with, the Bills and the Bengals and those teams to kind of the teams that are competing with the Chiefs to kind of throw off Patrick Mahomes and knock him down in that championship game because he pretty much always gets there. So I think this is a big move because you're pairing Hunter, who had 16 and a half sacks in 2023, with defensive rookie of the year, Will Anderson. So now you got a quarterback, you got a pretty decent set of skill players, great left tackle. Now you got a formidable pass rush. Derrick Stingley is a great corner. You got Jimmy Ward on the back end, and a lot of, D'Amico Ryan's guys might be better in year 2. Now he's been there for a year. So I just like what this Houston team is doing. I think anytime you see a team like Houston that already got to the divisional round, has a great quarterback, now, fortifies a pass rush, which is, outside of quarterback, probably the second most important, element or ingredient to a winning team. That really catches my attention. So I love the Danielle Hunter to Houston move.